Hello, hello. Nope. Hello, hello, hello. How is everybody today? How is your reading going? How was your week? Talk to me. 1 second. Let me put Tessa in here. Yes, I got a haircut. It's not as all over the place now. It's easier to manage. Feels pretty good.
Is it working?
Hey, T, what's going on? Yeah, it's working.
I don't think I can hear you.
You can't hear me? Huh. Well, that's not good.
Weird.
Yeah, that's not good at all. Can you hear me now?
I can. Yay.
Hey,
Okay.
good. And there's
Yay.
no echo, right? No echo for anyone? Anywhere? Do you still see the comments, T?
Okay, I'm seeing comments so far. Although they stopped again.
What do you mean?
Like they're paused right now.
Try to touch and scroll them up, maybe. Is that working?
Yeah. Are people like commenting right now?
Yeah. I hear no echo,
Okay.
no echo, you're great. Hey, hi Tessa. No echo. No
Okay, I'm gonna disconnect then and re-request because the comments aren't working.
Can you make sure you have the most updated version of Instagram?
Yes. Why do I feel like technically challenged? Okay, let me go do that right now.
Okay, and I will start talking about this. Okay, see you soon.
Bye.
All right, everyone's still there. Hello, hello, hello. Okay, so if everyone is caught up on their reading, we should have read to chapter 12 or part 12 or chapter, I think 31. Yeah, chapter 31. You should have read up to that point. Did everyone read up to that point? Hello, hello. It's short. Okay, so what is everyone thinking of the book so far? Tessa will be back in a couple minutes. Here we go. Thank you, thank you. Glad you guys liked the haircut. I haven't gotten a haircut in a while, so it felt good. T, are you there? Can you hear me?
And then the sound stops working. I'm gonna be patient this time.
I can hear you.
You can hear me?
Yeah.
I swear
you can't
this is
hear
not
me.
my fault.
But you can't hear me.
I love that I'm like mouth.
But I can.
No, you can't.
Everyone can hear both of us. Can you? Are your headphones on? All right, we're running. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's like if I exit and then come back in, I can hear, but then I can't see the comments, so it's a bit of a.
All right, well, I'll read comments to you then.
Okay.
And we'll pick up where we left off.
Okay.
Is that cool with everyone? Okay, they can hear us both, so we're good. We're good.
Right, I can hear you now. I unfortunately can't see the comments, which is a bummer.
Well, everyone's just saying hello. Okay, so we're going to pick off right where we left off and pick up right where we left off. And we left off with Auckland running into Nick in that room, leading to something. And we have no idea what was going to happen. After that, we found out in the next couple chapters that the commander wanted to see her. We have a lot to talk about today, actually.
Yeah, man. Whew.
Oh, my goodness. So what is everyone thinking so far? T, how do you want to start this discussion today? Okay. About Gaia says, Alberto, I got so many things to say and have found so many parallels between 1984 and The Handmaid's Tale. Can you not hear now?
Yeah, no, I can. I got it.
Okay. What else? I agree with you that there are a lot of parallels between Handmaid's Tale and 1984 because just like the basic premise of these books kind of loops them together. They're both dystopian. They're both about a time somewhere, possibly in the future, where people have lost their freedom. In Handmaid's Tale, it's a little more specific, similar to Fahrenheit 451, as to what world they're living in. 1984 is a little very specific as well. I find it interesting that we haven't really brought up Fahrenheit 451 as much as 1984 too. So I'm going to keep bringing up comments. The book is so good but terrifying. I find the book confusing at times because she's just back and forth with her thought process. Why do you think she has that back and forth?
Well,
yeah, T, go for it.
You mean, okay, I thought it was so interesting how they show how she deals with boredom also a lot in this book, and how her mind she has to keep her mind busy or else that's how she's reserving sanity, is what she describes in the book. Do you agree with where I'm going with this?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I find that device so helpful, and it's something that when you're reading a book, you can dive into a lot, like into the dialogue that's going on in her thoughts. And so I found that to be really useful to help me understand the mentality of people in those type of situations.
Mm-hmm.
I find actually reading this book, I start to kind of scare myself a bit because I feel like I'm entering into the mindset of these handmaids, and I'm reacting with them as if I am starting to think like them, which freaks me out.
Yeah,
but that's an incredible writer.
Well, I think that's cool in a way because we are starting to get more of her perspective in that sense of living this double life, where one life she has to live a certain way with all of these very rigid, crazy rules, but then she's also allowed to have this very full internal life that no one will see, and like you said, she has to do to keep part of herself.
To survive, to not lose her mind completely, which I'm surprised they haven't gotten more into that, but maybe that's coming up in the book about like women who've lost sanity at this point, you know?
Mm-hmm.
There's a really good quote about that. There's so much in this section particularly that we read about how to cope with this type of situation and the mind games that they play in order to keep themselves feeling somewhat a person when they're every day everyone's basically treating them and telling them that they're just objects, you know.
Mm-hmm. And then I've seen a couple comments. Someone says it's like her internal life is her last freedom.
Yeah.
So am I the only one who's got the name thing of Warren? Authored, the commander's name is Fred. Yes. We learned that right earlier in the book.
Yeah, like their property of Fred, of Warren, of Glenn.
What do you got? Oh, okay. This was actually interesting. What do you feel about the aunts telling them about future generations having it easier than them and that it'll be better? Do you think that'll be real?
I mean, yeah, if this continues past that first transition generation, then yeah, I mean, if you're born into that and you don't know what you're missing, I think that it'll be a lot easier because they don't have anything to feel like was completely stripped away from them. And I think obviously like any type of movement has to start somewhere. So it would just be like taking a step back. It'd be the women who used to live like this, realizing that wasn't fair, but they won't be as rebellious as this generation of women. This will be the most difficult for them to control. And then after that, I think it would be way easier.
See, I don't know, because okay, I need you guys to help be reminded here. Fahrenheit 451, they were all born into that world, right? Tessa, do you remember?
Oh no, I didn't read that with you guys.
Oh
Sorry.
God. Okay. Okay, hold on. I'm gonna read some comments. Everything's under control. I think that
I'm
the
gonna
aunt's
refresh
telling.
again.
Yeah, I think the aunt's telling that the next generation is going to be a better place is a delusion. Like, even the aunts who are still women without property in their name, etc., they still hope. So you think that's a reference to the? This is I cannot say your handle. MLLE_Reila, REILA, Rayla. Sorry. I think that the aunt's telling the next generation is going to be a better place is a delusion. Like even the aunts who are still women without property in their name, etc., there's still hope. So they think that it's a thing of hope. I think it's a thing that they're trying to make them feel like they're doing something for a better cause. Like, oh, you're a part of this world so that the people behind you can be better. Almost working about like some sort of like prosperity type vibe. Trying to build off of that human thing. Oh, someone brought up the idea of, okay, so let's try to go in order of the book too. So we have her new meetings with the commander. And then, but she doesn't bring that up right away. She talks about how the commander wants to see her. And then she goes into a couple things, and there's a few chapters in between. And then she's like, oh, I've been seeing the commander for 3 weeks.
Yeah, she starts with the line, will you give me a kiss? And we're like, what the? And then she goes back and explains how they got there.
And I think, what do you think of that? Why do you think she told it to us like that and not the other way?
I mean, I like that kind of storytelling because there is so many different facets of this world that she lives in, and I feel like it would, if it was told chronologically, I think it'd feel actually clunkier. Whereas it feels like it's tying it in, and she's using different situations that you can start to find parallels in, and then tying them together like in a little bow by the end of it, coming into a circle.
I think of it in two ways, like that, and then I think of it also as like that's the way that everyone else in that world finds out information. They don't find out before it happens; they find out weeks after, and then they have to piece it together like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's a really cool comment here, though. Camille says that the aunt's telling the girls about, the future generations and whatnot is like a propaganda. You always have to do things for the next generation for them to live better, even though it's not necessarily true, especially in this book. And I think that's something I hadn't thought about, how much of what they're constantly being told is a form of propaganda, even if it's how they're taking in the information and using it for themselves. Like they might have figured out a way to say, well, they'll probably take this information in like this, so we can use it if we shape how we say things.
Yeah, of course.
Sense? I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's like how they're manipulating them with what information is available and how they present the information. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
I also, same thing, like where you were talking about like withholding the information from the reader. It's the same thing. You're getting into that mindset, right? Where first a lot of time you're like, I mean, even the beginning of this book when she's going into the ceremony, but we don't really know what the ceremony is for a while. And I feel like that would be similar to when they're thrown into this world, not really understanding what's going on and being left with only parts of information. And it's their reality. So that's just such an awful thing to have to go through. And I feel like it puts you in that mindset too, where you're confused and you're trying to figure everything out and how to absorb this information.
Yeah. I have two comments here. Jane McNulty says it wouldn't reflect on her thought pattern if it was in order. No one has thoughts in order. Like we have thoughts kind of all over the place, and they all kind of tie themselves to a singular, maybe idea. So I agree with that. And then Triforce of Dragons, welcome back. A part of me wants to say that she told it that way because that kind of humor, shock tactic, is what she was like in the past. That's really cool to think about.
That
That
is
she'd be the
cool.
type of friend that you guys would have brunch with every once in a while, and then someday she'd be like, "Oh, I have a boyfriend. I've been seeing him for a few months, by the way." And all of your friends would be like, "What?"
Probably what happened with Luke, I feel.
Oh, she's like, "So I have a boyfriend. He's married.
He's
Not
married.
to me."
Whew. Yeah.
Okay, I like that we have these other books. I don't trust the commander either, just like we didn't trust O'Brien, and I didn't really fully trust Julia in 1984. So people are pulling a lot of, they're like, oh, I see commonalities here. I see. So Lopresti Mariana, how's it going? She says, the relationship between these two is really weird, and it reminds me about the relationship with O'Brien and Winston for some reasons. The relationship where the one person has a lot of knowledge and power and is slowly giving bits of information and bits of that to Winston, except in Winston it was in a very compromised place. Not saying that she's not compromised with him, but Winston was like enduring well, maybe it is similar. Like he was enduring a bunch of torture, and like O'Brien was the one torturing him. And then they'd have these moments of like, it felt very weird. I don't know. This feels a little bit more like they're both in the hole together. He might be the only one that scratches out, but he wouldn't be untouched. You know, the commander would get his own punishment. And someone brought up earlier, I didn't bring this up, that this is the first time in the book where we humanize men in a way. We get to see a guy be more human and not just a figure that she talks about in the distance. We get to kind of have a personal connection.
Other than when she started sympathizing with him before the ceremony.
Yeah. But we get to hear his voice.
Right, yeah.
And hold on, someone said this is the humanize him, and then we get to see that even in this world, although there is a power structure, someone said that it's the first time we see that the men are suffering too from older things that I think they didn't realize they were sacrificing. Like being able to play Scrabble with someone. And then, so I tell you another comment that I saw, because I'm just like holding them all in. Rita brought up the whole thing, and she goes, that part reminded her of 1984 when he let her read from the magazine, and she said that I have to read where I have to I'm reading so fast, sometimes skipping words to make sure I can get as many in as I can. And I don't know, I think that's like a really, for me, Margaret Atwood has really brought me into this world in a way that's like disturbing and fascinating and scary and exciting all at the same time.
Yeah, I find it so... Sorry, actually, keep going with your thought process because I was about to change topics slightly. Every time we bring something up, I have like 8 thoughts.
Yeah, I started writing stuff down like we do when we're together. So, same book club member from before, I was thinking about how these chapters were about the commander. How this man, even in a position of power, still wants something normal like Scrabble at night and a good night kiss that you meet. The way we keep knowing more about what happened, so at first you're wondering, would it be chronologically, would make spoilers of things. Oh, that's another thing. I'm like, how much of this is chronological? Well, I guess it is chronologically through the story of Ofglin, right? Like we're following her.
Right, but then we have these flashbacks to explain what's happening. But it would be so boring if they did it, if we went with them to the Red Center and then we went with her to her first posting, and then it's nice that she throws us into the heat of everything and then she's like, I'll fill you in, but this is what's happening. I think that's just more interesting as a reader.
I've noticed a theme in the book too of separation. Like she uses her thoughts to separate her from like the emotion she may feel with them. Like she actively pushes them down sometimes, being like, nope, not going to let that happen here because I'm not that person. That doesn't happen here anymore. That's a different life. And then you see this also separation with I found it, hold on. Where is it? I saw it. Okay, so Rita was commenting to another fan saying, yes, exactly, she's trying to separate herself from the thought of her daughter. Even then, we don't know her daughter's name. We don't know her mother's name. We know Moira. We don't know her name. She has all of these walls being built to keep her separate. And then my question is why? What is she trying to bring to light by having us see this world like that, where everything has to be separate?
Well, obviously there's a lot of physical things that happen to them that are extremely difficult to endure in this world. But the most challenging thing for them is not to allow it to affect them mentally, and that is the biggest challenge, is to maintain that strength throughout. So she has to be able, it's like these exercises for her mind to be able to last and to survive, because once that goes, she doesn't have as much chance to survive in this whole system. She
So
talks
someone
about,
says she's dehumanizing herself to cope with what's happening.
yeah, of course.
And then
And
Anna Cat, sorry, I just want to keep reading
yeah,
comments
yeah,
because I'm losing so many. Anna
yeah.
Cat Fernandez says, these chapters were very focused on the power of words. Because of the Scrabble games and her writing the quote in her bedroom, the magazine, the books, words are power. And I do now see that theme in these in the chapters we're talking about today.
And I don't think we actually talked about this last time, surprisingly enough. I think because it's probably such an obvious part of this book, but in situations where they're trying to control people, education is the first thing that becomes a threat. So anybody who, I mean, that's why they don't want these women to read anymore, because that's a huge threat to them. And most of the women that we're seeing, the only reason some of these handmaids have degrees or have whatever type of education they have is because there's so few fertile women that they have to take what they can get, but the rest of them would have been killed, which we've seen happen before, where the government goes around and like undercover will kill people who are educated, who pose a threat to a dictatorship or to some sort of
we
controlling.
see that in any totalitarian regime. Where
Exactly.
the government or anyone that doesn't fall immediately into line possesses that quality that they can't control, so they need to get rid of them.
Right, yeah. So it's so much easier to control people who don't know what's going on, which is what they do. Even if these people are capable of processing it, they just take the information away from them.
Which is a theme we see in all of the dystopian books we're seeing.
Yes.
And that was
it's one of the first things.
And that was something that really... one thing I loved about, that I want to start talking about now, everybody, if we can start commenting on this, was the idea of the world before. These few chapters were the first times we ever got to see kind of how things fell into this world, Gilead. Like, we got to see slowly because of some sort of threat. Mm-hmm. And then it's funny because Atwood is commenting there on like the fact that often in these regimes they use fear as like their main tactic to control. Fear of other, and then fear of something within. So there is no like safety and ground. And I think that's something we need to always be aware of too, just in like regular life. When are they using fear?
Of course.
And I think that's something else we could see. How fear is even a tactic for Auckland to use when they're in the office and he asks a question and she's like, I could tell he's a little bit afraid right now.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because they're both being compromised when they're in that situation. So that's sometimes how people can get away with doing things that are rebellious like that in those circumstances, because then they're both in on it. So they're both going to get in trouble if one outs the other. But I don't know. It's just, I find it's all very interesting to see what he has at stake and what would the consequences be for him versus what would they be for her.
Mm-hmm.
So
and then
who has the upper hand?
Someone commented here, I find it interesting to see how easily Luke accepted having control over Alfred's finances and house and everything.
That scene made me so sad, because even though I see her in every single chapter basically being property and being considered not a person, just really this empty shell that hopefully houses a child for someone else. Like, you see the most extreme version of it, but then for some reason that scene, I guess because maybe that feels further away from, you know, a day-to-day reality for us, but having just like your independency taken away from you, and then the man now being like, oh yeah, I got like, that made me sick.
It was just scary how quickly it was accepted. And that's another theme that's always like that I've seen present is like, how quickly is normal? How quickly does something become normal? And all it takes is that first time being like, what was his first defense? Oh, I bet you it's only temporary.
Mm-hmm.
Gone.
Right.
Someone asks, women can't hold property anymore, but why does it always happen to women first? I think this book specifically is trying to show us something. I think there's a historically patriarchal context to our society, the one that we currently live in, that's been alive since the biblical era. So I think there's that.
I think there's a couple rare places in the world where it's the opposite, but most other times it's always been, oh, hey, Stella.
Yeah, Stella.
Oh, I hope my nephew's watching because he'll be so excited to see her.
We have people saying, I agree with Tessa. I'm always so mad when I read that she doesn't think her name matters anymore. Our name is identity. It's who we are. We're not someone else's property.
So,
yeah.
One of the things I wanted to bring up before we forget is, so her talking about, like, whenever she has these little moments of, like, making fun of the commander or his wife, or having those moments where we get into her mind where we actually see glimpses of her real personality of time before, and then we actually have someone to root for, because if she were to just give in to this and just go along with it, and I know she's not saying her name, but she's still giving us glimpses of that she's a fighter, that she is still partly this person she was before, that's still somewhere inside of her, even if she has to put up this wall to deal with the hits of this current situation. But if we didn't see those glimpses, I think it'd be very, very difficult as readers to keep going with her, and we wouldn't have anybody to root for, and it gives us a little bit of hope that there is something that's coming soon, and that keeps our interest, right? I think it's important. This happens all the time in TV or film. Like, they always tell you, if you're playing a character, once you give up, the audience gives up on you too. So usually characters who do give up, even because that is a real story that needs to be told too, but the camera doesn't stay on them too long, because you need something to fight for as an audience. Anyway, so I think those glimpses of her is her way of showing us that she still is that other name, but for now she's putting on this role so she can survive.
There's something that I feel is very like V for Vendetta about this book too, because of like the totalitarianness of this regime, and people are saying I completely agree, Tessa.
And at some point we have to bring up the humor part, because I saw some comments after that were like, what do you mean this is funny? Which is something we should address.
Well, let's talk about that now.
Because it goes exactly with what we're saying right now.
Yeah, Tess and I were talking before we have our live. We talk about what we kind of want to bring up and things like that. And I brought up how I actually actively was looking for and found some moments that were humorous in the book. And I talked about why, and why I felt that they're so important. I know some people were like, this book is so serious, how could there be any humor? And I was like, well, let me look at this. Maddie McCall, individualism, identity, fear, and safety. Individualism and identity. Your humor is such a part of both of those things.
Yes, big time.
She makes a pun.
Yeah.
Give me a sec. I'm going to find this pun. She makes a pun about the signs. Ooh, I want to talk about another thing in a second.
Okay,
I have my quotes today too.
Okay, you got it. Okay.
Yeah, you go for it, T. What are you saying?
So basically, when you're watching something super, super heavy, or reading something, same thing. We need someone to root for. We don't want someone to give up. Just as a reader, the lead character usually is someone who has fight in them. And then at the same time, if it's really, really heavy material, as humans, our instinct always, when we dip down really far into a dark place, we try to do something to balance it out, because that's just the nature of humans generally, and especially humans when they're in really rough, difficult circumstances. They try to find some way to balance that. So when you're writing stuff like this, you need to find a little bit of levity in order to pull your readers through. So when she's like making fun of the commander, or her little comments that she makes, mostly I find a lot of the humor is coming when she has those thoughts in her head. One of the scenes that Alberto and I talked about that we think is so funny is when Offline comes to pick her up when they're walking, and she has her little thoughts that she says to her, and she's like, oh God, she's so annoying. And then she's like, oh, like, good morning. Like, it's like all these like pleasantries, and then she's like, what a pious little deep, you know, like, and then she's like, oh, we've been said good weather, you know, but like that's what she says, but in her head she's like, I'm over this girl. And that's just like such a, I love having those moments, because it gives us some sense of, okay, this girl's going to be able to make it through. She's going to be able to survive. She still has her personality somewhere within all of this. Did you find the quote?
I found multiple quotes that actually kind of like brought up a new theme that I want to bring up. So I'm going to read them to you. The first one I want to read is, I remember a television program I once saw, a rerun made years before. I must have been 7 or 8, too young to understand it. It was the sort of thing my mother liked to watch, historical, educational. She tried to explain it to me afterwards, to tell me that the things in it had really happened, but to me it was only a story. I thought someone had made it up. I suppose all children think that about any history before their own. If it's only a story, it becomes less frightening. And then when I slide into...
basically her mother just summarizing like themes of this book, you know?
Yeah, literally though. And then when your mother's wisdom, you know, your mom's never wrong. The part where she talks about the mistress to the Nazi officer in the German camp. And,
yes,
what could she have been thinking about? Not much, I guess. Not back then, not at the time. She was thinking about how not to think. The times were abnormal. She took pride in her appearance. She did not believe he was a monster. He was not a monster to her. Probably he had some endearing trait. He whistled off-key in the shower. He had a yen for truffles. He called his dog Liebchen, and he made it sit up for little pieces of raw steak. How easy it is to invent humanity for anyone at all. What an available temptation. And then the last one is, we stood in a cluster on the steps outside the library. We didn't know what to say to one another, since none of us understood what had happened. There was nothing much we could say. We looked at one another's faces and saw dismay, a certain shame, as if we'd been caught doing something we shouldn't. It's outrageous, one woman said, but without belief. What was it about this that made us feel we deserved it? So with these quotes, I'm seeing this idea of like, why do we deserve the democracy that we live in? That, to me, that's just a question that I know this is kind of random.
What's your role in a democracy to maintain it?
Exactly. And then I think Margaret Atwood was kind of, to me, reading those quotes again after the conversation we've been having, is kind of like, oh, what makes me feel like we deserve the ability to even have this live right now? What have we personally fought for? What are we working towards that gives us this ability to have an individuality, to have a story that's our own, to do all of this?
Has anybody felt so free in the last, like, since we started reading this book? I've really appreciated so many little things. Like, I've appreciated, honestly, being able to make a joke with someone out loud and not be, like, hit for making a joke, or, like, making my own coffee. You know, like, stuff like little tiny things that I don't know, this book is just...
This is cool, though. Again, coffee is a thing. Having coffee is a thing. In 1984, we saw that, where they're like, oh, we only have fake coffee. We don't have real coffee. But when they found real coffee, it was like, it's funny how, I'm sorry, I just think it's funny how important coffee is.
It's, yeah, just like to be able to have control, to be able to have choice is something I never want to take for granted. And this book has been a really lovely reminder that choice is something we have to constantly fight to keep or to gain. And also, you mentioned the quote we were talking about, the lady in that documentary, and
Yes.
she says all of this she believed about her man that she was humanizing. All of this she would have believed, because otherwise, how could she have kept living? And this is, I think, that explains why when she's watching the commander before the ceremony happens, she often allowed herself to believe these realities of him, because otherwise I think anger would get the best of her. I think that
Which
it
she
would
always
become
does
dangerous.
push away. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And same with when she thinks about Luke, she has multiple different variations of him to prepare herself mentally for when she finds out the truth. But also, she needs to have those variations of what could have happened, with so many of them being that he's alive, because otherwise,
well, it's that hope.
What's the point?
It's that hope. What is that? Life can't be lived without hope. There's a quote like that somewhere. Also, T, so you know, everyone's kind of commenting. I've been thinking the same thing. About all the freedoms I have to be able to even choose when to take a bath. I love coffee. I even appreciated butter. Guys, I swear, I had a moment when I opened the fridge and said, okay, I'm so glad I don't have to use butter on my face.
Honestly, were you guys so mad when the commander laughed at her for using butter? I literally thought about my multiple face products that I had in there. I was like, how dare you take such an important part of just having a routine that makes someone a person and just laugh it off as if, oh, well, why do those things matter? You're just a thing.
Can I bring this moment up for me?
Yes, please.
You read that moment and you got angry and mad. When he goes, butter, I'm like, yeah, it is kind of funny, butter. I didn't think of it as like this thing, which I think is super cool. Different perspective.
So much more than butter. It's like, it's her, it's that she's important enough to need something for her skin. Because, but of course it doesn't matter if she doesn't have lotion or if she doesn't have anything to take care of herself, because she literally is treated as if she is not a person. So him laughing that off was basically like, you're not a person. Doesn't matter. But then he gets to the hand lotion, thank God. But, yeah. Oof.
So I see, yes, oh my God, like, honestly, the absolute rudeness.
But I swear he didn't mean it. It's just, it's in, but that is the worst type of.
It's ignorance.
Because, so basically there's blatant sexism that happens. Yes. There's also another version of sexism that happens a lot that is kind of sneaky. And it's harder to call out, because it's just in things like where someone might laugh at something you say and you're like, okay, well, I can't really start a whole conversation right now about how what I said should have been taken seriously. And I think if a man said it to you, you would have taken it seriously, because, but that's totally what was happening in those conversations. And it's this more subtle version of sexism that leaks in. Obviously, this book has lots of blatant showings of it, but I'm just relating it to day-to-day life that I experience when I feel like little things that leak into conversation that remind me that I'm not a man, and that's not good, you know?
Yeah.
Not saying that it's not good, don't get that mixed up, but that's how I feel when I have those conversations.
Okay, and then people are saying, I feel like the commander was just extremely ignorant, period. Like, he doesn't know why she would get in trouble or what the rules are that she has to follow.
Do we believe that?
When he should have known as a commander.
Is that the ignoring theme? Do we think that he seriously is like, okay, I'm high up in this society and I basically make a bunch of this a reality, so I want to turn a blind eye?
I see it as more. I think it's a bit of both. This ignorance. I think he's at a point. He's at a point of privilege where he's allowed to be ignorant.
Yeah. How
And that's what that's
blessed
bringing
is
out
to
more than
be.
anything, is this idea that this man up here is at a point where Nick still needs to kind of watch what he does.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't have a room of books. He doesn't have old magazines and Scrabble. And
Mm-hmm.
he isn't inviting mistresses. He isn't inviting handmaids up to his room to hang out. He still has to live by a certain code, but this guy is now past that. And think about it. It's where all the knowledge is. He has the power for all of these things.
Yeah,
And he's ignorant.
that whole office is such a symbol.
And he's ignorant to the minutia of every day. He has no idea what's going on, and he's allowed to be like that. Whereas
he's allowed because it doesn't affect him.
Because he's a dude that the system works for.
Right. It's just funny because like I think that is such a great thing to highlight, because it goes for any privileged group where so often you have conversations where someone's like, but what? Like they literally have no idea because it is so far off their radar that they haven't taken time to put themselves in someone's shoes, or literally just ask the person, which he actually is doing.
Well,
at least
that's the thing. Like, I had this whole thing about how he's like ignorant, like he's above it. He's ignorant, but he's also ignoring. But that's also like kind of how the system's built. They're like, oh, we're gonna build it for you, so
right.
that you perpetuate it.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to ask too many questions. It's not for you
right.
to know. You're just in charge.
Whew.
Yeah, I mean, I don't trust him either. I see what saying. I don't trust him. I don't know why.
No, yeah, of course. I mean, when it all comes down to it, he's a leader of this effed up system.
But I just find it so interesting that he's still like, not still. I mean, that's the thing. Like, as a dude reading this, I'm like, what decisions were made that this became okay? And then I realized after reading what happened with Luke, I was like, oh, that's how.
Interesting.
I was like, how did everyone let this happen? Because I know that, like, if my mom just randomly was told that she couldn't work one day anymore or hold property or anything, I think I really hope in our day and age right now, if someone passed that, there'd be riots in the streets. There would be fires. There would be cars getting flipped over. There would be serious aggression. I hope.
Also, your dad would be not happy. Like, he would not just be like, it's okay, I got you.
And that's the thing. Like, that first step of him saying, instead of questioning this, let's go with it. That's where you already lost, I guess. And I think that's what she's trying to bring up is like, no. Luke gave away his sword and shield the minute he was like, this is okay. And that's the thing. That's accepting that normalcy again. There's that theme coming back. That's so important. But then someone says that's the genius of this novel. The genius of this book is the structure of the novel. It's made so that you have no choice but to read. You have to continue. And I think that's really cool. Complacency was the downfall of all of them. Yes, I'm guessing there's still more to be revealed.
It's such a theme.
That's why I'm pleased to see our U.S. society still fighting. We have no other choice. The minute we stop fighting, the minute we stop being whatever we think we are, whatever we think we want to be. As you can see, the minute they stopped fighting, there was a police that they didn't even recognize that was controlling stuff. They no longer had power. That police shut down things so they could actively shoot at unarmed civilians protesting, which is part of our... Think about it. They said the day that happened, they suspended the Constitution, which, as an American, is...
Can you imagine that not being like, wait, this is shocking information? They were like, oh, okay. That would have been... What I'm interested in is how long people waited around in that period where they didn't really know what was happening, and why it wasn't more of a wake-up call to get...
No, exactly.
Do something about it or get out of there or something. I don't know.
It's just we have to, like... This book makes me feel like we have to really notice all of the signs.
Mm-hmm.
Not just
and
the
learn
ones that
from
are
history.
big and red.
Because that's why her mom was showing her these documentaries about things that had happened in history, because stuff like this has already happened. And the more we distance ourselves from it or think of it as a story, or as it's quoted in the book, live in between the gaps of the pages, the less likely we are to understand that this is a real thing that can happen, and this is something that we have to take action, and we have to learn from our past. It's so important.
There's a quote that I read recently, like within this week, that was like, we don't learn about history to learn about what happened. We learn about history to make sure it doesn't happen again. And also, just really quickly, just another Gaia. About Gaia, one of her quotes brought something up to me. I said this is very V for Vendetta. In V for Vendetta, there's that scene where Natalie Portman's in the prison, and she gets the notes from the woman that's in the prison next door, or like, you know, in the cell next door, and that's like her way of saying, keep fighting, keep going, you can do this. And you see that in this with the other girl that died, being like, don't let him get to you. Like, I don't know, I think that's pretty cool.
And I feel like we're about to transition into that scene to talk about the scene when Offglen and Offred make eye contact.
Can you start that? I'll be right back. But you start that. I'll be right back.
Okay. Okay. I really wish I could see your guys' comments, because you make the best comments, and then afterwards I can scroll through them. But I want to be referring to them right now. Anyway, okay, that scene, I'll start talking about it, and then Alberto can fill me in on what you guys are saying. Basically, who else felt that, because now we're in this mentality of the handmaids, when they made eye contact, I audibly gasped. I was like, oh, and it did feel so risky and almost violating, which I hate, because I mean, in our world, in Canada, I mean, if I didn't make eye contact with someone when I was speaking to them, they would think that was rude. But in this situation, you know, we're so on board with how they're thinking that when they made eye contact, that Alberto actually was saying, it felt almost like sexual. It's just crazy how restricted they are, and so then these little things become huge. But when they made eye contact, that was such a exciting moment, because then I felt like, okay, there's hope. Like, it felt like another glimpse of hope, that she had been able to connect with someone, that she's not alone. Do you want to take it away?
Yes. I heard you say, you said that I had said that moment was like sexual, and I wasn't saying because of like the fetishization of like two women. No. I was saying sexual because of I think Anna Cat Fernandez commented too, because of the intimacy. It was so powerful.
Yes,
and
I don't mean it in like a weird.
Yeah, it wasn't in like a weird thing. It was in like this beautiful moment of
like
true
a charged,
intimacy.
Right.
Like this charged moment where they were recognizing each other, in a way.
Right.
And I thought that
each
was
other
so,
and
like, oh my God! Like reading it, I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
It almost felt to me as if time had stopped.
Yes, and it did, even on the page. I want to go back and see how she structured that scene, because I felt like time slowed when they looked at each other. Like, I feel like she just... Are you looking that up?
Yeah, what chapter was that in?
I probably have it written. Or maybe not.
Okay, hold on. That was not too far away from the end. Does anyone know what chapter that is? A moment of rebellion built on hope. Yeah, it was. That was...
Oh yeah, I'm looking. Well, hopefully you can find it there. Yeah, man, though, that made me so mad that we had to stop reading. I find it so hard to stop, but I know that if I read forward, I'll mention stuff by accident, and I don't want to spoil it.
Do you want me to read it? This little page?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
How far up should I go?
I mean, definitely the moment when they make eye contact. I wish I could look at it. I want to know how she structured that made us all feel like that. Or anyway.
Well, they talk about the wall, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how they go to look at the wall, and they talk about ordering prayers. So they're going to this place which should be of great reverence. Right? They go to this place that they're literally doing prayers for people, where they just type them out and that counts as praying for someone. But obviously there's some way that the regime was like making money and getting that from them because, oh, you know, you buy more prayers, it makes you look more pious. Who runs the prayers? Oh, the government. Why do you want to look more pious? So that you don't look less pious and then become someone they want to kill.
This is totally also that reading that we read about. I don't want to take us off track, but this is very much when Jesus and his disciples were sitting there, and the scribes and the scribes walk over and they're like, "Oh, Jesus, your disciples are not washing their hands before they eat. That is against God's way." And Jesus is like, God's not working from the outside. He's working from the inside. Like, you can print as many of these prayer things as you want and pay the government to print them for you, or you can just be a good person. And what do you think is what's better?
What do you
like,
think's really going to matter when you
judging
get up?
people?
What currency is going to be better for you when you get up there?
What's going to work better when you get to heaven and you say, well, I printed off a lot of these things and I had money, so I thought I was more like money making you a better person.
But it's just obviously
Anyway.
the things they always use when trying to control. And it's funny that we see it in the Bible. We see it in Handmaid's Tale. We see it in all of these dystopian. The Bible's not dystopian, but there are lessons to be learned in every book. That's why books are important. Thank you, Camille. 15 minutes left. I'm going to read this to kind of bring it back, and then we'll go into favorite quotes. So,
oh, and I wanted to, there's one other thing that we talked about that I want to bring up, but just remind me, because I
write it down.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so I try to remember what this place sold when it was a store before it was turned into Soul Scrolls. I think it was lingerie, pink and silver boxes, colored pantyhose, brassieres with lace, silk scarves. Something lost. Offglyn and I stand outside Soul Scrolls, looking through the shatterproof windows, watching the prayers well out from the machines and disappear again through the slot, back to the realm of the unsaid. Now I shift my gaze. What I see is not the machines, but Offglyn, reflected in the glass window. She's looking straight at me. We can see into each other's eyes. This is the first time I've ever seen Offglyn's eyes directly, steadily, not aslant. Her face is oval pink and plump, but not fat. Her eyes roundish. She holds my stare in the glass, level, unwavering. Now it's hard to look away. There's a shock in this scene. It's like seeing somebody naked for the first time. There's a risk. Suddenly, in the air between us where there was none before. Even this meeting of eyes holds danger, though nobody's near. At last, Offglyn speaks. Yeah, right?
Yeah, it's that whole, I knew it, because I was like, I feel like there was this huge pregnant pause right there where all I could think about was the fact that they're staring, and it's because she describes them looking at each other for like 5 sentences. Right?
Yeah, it was, so we see into each other's, boom, she's looking straight at me. New paragraph. It's a whole paragraph. We see each other's eyes. First time I've ever seen her eyes. I'm actually going to look at her face and talk about her face. And then she's still staring, level, unwavering. It's literally like she was, and then I think we're so in Offred's mind, we forget to think about it from Offred's perspective. I think Offred was like, can I trust this girl? Can I trust you?
That was the first, the crying thing happened. And then she waited however long in between that to see if Offred would tell anyone, and then she didn't. And then they make eye contact for a very long time, it seems. And that's the second where, she's just like slowly being like, okay, that worked. Okay, now I'm going to say this funny little comment about the prayers. That was a cool scene.
Like even reading it again, I'm like, whew.
I know, because you can't breathe while she's talking about them.
And then Tish Skywalker, cool name. She says the whole paragraph slows down the pace of the novel completely, which makes the whole scene more intense. Which I think is something we don't talk about a lot in this book club, but the pacing of the writing and the way if I wasn't reading Anna Cat Fernandez, I would be holding my breath too. Like, it was one of those things where it's just like, it takes your breath away. You're just,
Yeah, oh,
I
I love
actually,
Margaret Atwood.
I think she's so amazing.
She's so good. She just like makes me feel I think exactly what she's hoping people will feel by reading this. You get into the mind of these readers, not just intellectually, like emotionally, viscerally. It's such a great experience reading her.
I agree. I agree. Guys, I actually am looking at the time. I started the live at 1:04 or 1:03, so I feel like we only have 4 or 5 minutes left. So should we do this really quickly? Guys, we're going to finish the book for this coming Sunday. All right? Finish the book. The live will be on Sunday, and then the following week we start Life of Pi. So, yeah, I will put that in a picture on the Instagram account so you guys have it. But let's see if we can talk about quotes.
Right, because it'll cut us off.
Yeah, I'm going to start with this one. I don't want it to cut off again.
I know.
Why is it that night falls instead of rising like the dawn? Yet, if you look east at sunset, you can see not rising. You can see night rising, not falling. Darkness lifting into the sky, up from the horizon. I think that particular quote is about perspective. Even the words we use has given us a perspective with which to look at life. Night falls, dawn
and
rises.
for Offred, like this whole period of her life could be considered darkness. So she's choosing to say, this isn't going to be my fall. I'm going to get through this. I'm going to look at it from a perspective of strengthening me.
I like that.
That's what I took from it, but I think it could relate to people too.
No, yeah, I think it's one of the reasons why this book is incredible is because so many things, it's so many levels at once. It's never just one.
Yeah.
Live in the present, make the most of it. It's all you've got. Time to take stock. And that's something I think we do see Offred do a lot. We see her take in the things that she appreciates and acknowledge them. And be like, wow, the way that just happened reminded me of this. And I remember loving that. Wow, I can't believe I didn't appreciate it when I had it.
She also has so much time to think. I'm going to write that down to bring that up later because that reminds me of...
we only have 2 minutes.
Getting the countdown. Like, bring it up next week, I mean.
Next week, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, but remember that forgiveness too is a power. To beg for it is a power, and to withhold and bestow it is a power, perhaps the greatest. In light of Moira, the aunts were less fearsome and more absent. Their power had a flaw to it. We didn't talk about how badass Moira was.
Oh my God!
We screwed up.
There's just so much to talk about.
No, I mean, and that was one of my favorite parts in the book because she was the one that found the hole.
I love that character.
Okay, can you write that down too so we remember to talk about Moira?
I talk about education being a flaw because she was educated in mechanics. That's why she was able to figure that out. Moira.
I can't believe we forgot Moira.
We didn't forget her. It's just there's so much good stuff.
Yeah, Moira is the definition of a badass. Moira is a legend. I love Moira.
There's a lot of badass.
Moira's my spirit animal, and the resilience power is memorizing. Moira's such a BA. Moira's amazing. Moira is the woman.
She's awesome.
And someone brought it up earlier. I'm sorry I didn't get to comment on it, but Tessa, will you write this down?
Yep.
Just commenting on what it must have been like to be LGBTQ in this very binary, constricting world that is created in this book.
There's a lot. I think we might get into it more, but if you want to watch the TV show too, they do focus on that. Okay. It's heavy.
We have 10 seconds left, so I'm going to say thank you guys for this week. Remember, you get to finish the book now, no more stopping, and always be curious, be questioning, and be great forces of positive change in your environment.